Welcome to See You on the Other Side, where the world of the mysterious collides with the world of entertainment. A discussion of art, music, movies, spirituality, the weird, and self-discovery. And now, your hosts, musicians and entertainers who have their own weakness for the weird, Mike and Wendy from the band Sunspot.
I feel like I'm talking to the past, Wendy.
Well, I feel like I'm talking to the future.
Right, because it's 3:20 here, and it's 1:20 where you are.
We're totally podcasting in different time zones.
I know, it's pretty sweet. Well, just the idea, first of all, we're video conferencing right now, and so we're talking to each other 2,000 miles away, and you can see somebody in almost real time. It kind of blows my mind.
And every time we talk about this, I feel like such an old codger.
It does. I mean, when I was a kid and you saw somebody video conferencing on a movie or whatever, you're like, that's unbelievable.
Right. We were just discussing this yesterday. I'm in California visiting my brother and his family, and, they had my GPS because I use Waze so they could see when I was arriving. And, they're waiting outside when I got here. And I was remembering when I was a kid and my grandparents would drive from Denver.
Right, you never know.
They would, that morning, they would call us from Nebraska or whatever and say, oh, we should be getting into town around between 5:30 and 7 maybe. And so we would just go outside and sit there and watch the street.
Right, for hours, just because you're like, well, eventually they'll get here.
At that point, the notion of having a map in our hand that's got a little dot that shows exactly where they were would have just seemed like magic.
Yeah, I think the whole idea still does. The idea that you can be somewhere else, and you're like, oh, I got to get home and check my messages. I haven't said that in several years. Ooh, I can't wait to see who called me.
An answering machine.
Right, like this thing that was click and moving parts and stuff.
Mechanical device.
So anyway. Here we are talking like the oldest people in the world.
I remember when.
I can't believe the Wright brothers made a flying machine.
Yeah, but it's cool, and we're cross time zone podcasting. So, have we done this before?
I don't think we have.
I don't think we have either.
Not at least cross time zones. So that's pretty. This is a pretty big moment for us.
Oh,
this whole time traveling inside the podcast. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
So that's fun. And what else is fun is if anybody wants to see our band in action, Halloween's not over yet. We've got a zombie flavored video up right now.
Right, and we talked about this a couple episodes ago, right after we did the filming itself, because the song was written for one of our episodes here, as well as for the web series called The Deadersons, which is on YouTube. And we had talked about how much fun we had doing the recording when they put us all in the zombie makeup and everything. And the video's out now. So if you want to see Sunspot as zombies, you can find that online, and we'll put it in the show notes at othersidepodcast.com/65.
Yeah, you can see it there. It's pretty sweet. The makeup's pretty exciting. So anyway, it was a fun video.
It was. Absolutely.
And, so check that out. That's for a show called The Deadersons, and we'll put a link to The Deadersons, which you can watch, which is a comedy horror mix-up based in Rockford, Illinois.
That's right.
The home of Cheap Trick.
That's right.
Yeah. So that's always.
It has rock in its name, so obviously
it does.
It's a great place to play.
Right. It is pretty fun. Rockford is pretty fun. So anyway, that's just a couple of cool things we got going on. But you know what else is cool, Wendy?
What's cool, Mike?
Shadow people.
Ooh.
Yeah, that's right. So, okay. What do you know about shadow people?
Well, it's funny. I was just thinking about how I can remember talking to you about shadow people pretty much as long as I've known you.
That's right.
I remember after we first met in college having a discussion about shadow people because we were both Art Bell listeners, and that's a frequent topic on the Art Bell show. So our own experiences or stories that we had heard, we were talking about those and freaking ourselves out.
Yeah.
But, what I know about shadow people is that, and pretty much all I know is I learned from Art Bell.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. Most people can say that probably.
Love that guy. But is that it's a phenomenon experienced by a lot of people. So many people have had experiences seeing what they call shadow people, which we don't really know what it is exactly, but it's, a human looking form that is basically a shadow without a human to go with it.
That's right, exactly. You see somebody that's just like a shadow moving around, and there's no human associated with it, a shadow person. And that, I mean,
everywhere I go, my shadow follows me, but once in a while it takes off, and then it's just a shadow person.
Right, just goes off to see somebody else, and you're like, hey.
Scare them.
But no, I remember that. And Art Bell, funny enough, I was listening to Art Bell 2 nights ago, and he had on a guest that we had on, Deborah Moffat from A Deadly Haunting.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, oh, because
Cool.
I just started listening. I put it in. I'm like, I know this woman's voice. What? And it's
That's amazing.
Deadly Haunting. I'm like, hey, Art, you're picking the right guests. I think
Mike, you're in good company as an
yeah,
interviewer.
I suppose. But I guess, and you and I have been talking about shadow people for a long time, and I guess we should get to starting out my shadow person story. Because my shadow person story happens before, and I mean, most of the shadow people stuff comes from like the early 2000s, because somebody wrote a book on it, and then it started like to proliferate around the internet when people started to tell their stories.
Yes.
So when I first had an experience, and this is,
And
go ahead.
real quick, if I may, this is exciting because you don't have a lot of stories of things that you've witnessed firsthand that are unexplained.
Right. Yeah, most of the stuff I've seen, it's pretty easy.
Although we all want to see those things,
Mm-hmm.
We don't have a lot of examples, but this is one of yours that's pretty cool and pretty creepy. So
Right. Well, because I'm not going to take a picture of an orb and be like, oh my God, it's my great grandmother. Like
yeah,
she's
we
here.
know how you feel about orbs.
Oh, I know. I repeat it every time. But every time I'm on Twitter, everybody's like, hey, check out these orbs. And I'm like, I got to say, I don't believe in orbs. But thank you for thinking of me.
Full disclosure.
Right. Full
Mike is
disclosure.
not an orber.
So stop sending orb pictures. Thank you. But right, I'd rather be Twitter friends with Anthony Weiner or whatever than to get orb pictures. So
You did not just say that.
yeah, I did.
You are so opening the door for.
I know. I didn't even think about that. I was just making a joke, and now I realize that was a bad idea. Anyway, my Twitter is @SunspotWendy, and that's where you can find me online.
I hate you.
So let's go. I mean, so this is probably the first. I mean, this is probably the first paranormal story I told you, like 20 years ago,
Yeah.
and it was probably around Halloween or something. And let's go back to the summer of 1993. 1993. What was cool that summer? Let's see. I was 16, so probably anybody but me.
I think Ace of Base.
Ace of Base was pretty close. I think Ace of Base was. I think All That She Wants was on the radio. I mean, I was still listening to 80s rock and stuff like that. I probably Pearl Jam's second album.
Oh yeah, and Nirvana.
Yeah.
That's
Oh,
pretty
Kurt
huge at that point.
Kurt Cobain was still about 8 or 9 months away from killing himself, and so their second record had come out, In Utero. And you're right. So you think about 1993, like I think that was the summer that Jurassic Park came out.
Oh wow.
Yeah, that was the summer Jurassic Park. Last Action Hero, which I loved. Most people think was crap, but I think you look at it now as a parody instead of an action movie, and you love it.
Yeah.
Maybe Super Mario Brothers came out that year too. Yeah, Super Mario Brothers came out that year too. Anyway, there's some great movies, some dogs, but so let's think of it's 1993 going back. Summer 1993, I'm playing role-playing games at my friend's house.
Oh, you little nerd, you.
Yeah, I totally was a nerd. So it's like a group of 5 of us playing role-playing games. It's me, 2 other guys, and 2 girls.
Okay.
And so I knew that both of these guys were really into these girls. And I had a girlfriend at the time, so I was kind of letting them play that out in the game, because they were both, hoping for the best.
Impressing the ladies with their role-playing game skills.
Right, with their role-playing skills, like, ooh, I rolled a D20. Well, we weren't playing Dungeons & Dragons, so it wasn't a 20-sided based game. It's a game called Top Secret SI, which is more 10-sided based. Sorry, nerds, that I know that, but I love that.
Apologies, man.
Right. But so we're playing this game, we're having fun, and then my friend's like, let's go take a walk in the marsh. I'm like,
Why would you ever do that?
Well, because we're young, we used to like to go see weird things, and
It's what teenagers do.
yeah, you want to go see like a place that has some stories, and the Vernon Marsh where I grew up has some stories because they
Satanic
found
panic.
well, this is real though. They did find the head and the hands of a murder victim there.
Okay, that's horrible.
So they found that because this person had killed somebody in Illinois, had driven up to Wisconsin, the farthest out in the woods he could find, which is Vernon, Wisconsin, which is kind of a ring around Big Bend, which is a little southeast of Milwaukee. Anyway, it's out in the woods. And so that's where he dumped the head in the hand. So there's always
That's
that.
awful.
Yes.
That's a perfect, like, teenager, scary place to visit.
Right, because of that, there's urban legends associated with the place.
Okay.
And, so we walk down, we're walking through this marsh, and it doesn't feel really that scary to me at the time. There's a full moon out. It's nighttime.
Nature.
We're having fun. It's nature. There's a trail. I mean, there's signs that say no hunting because it's a big hunting area. And I'd been there before with my friends screwing around and things like during the day. Anyway, we go down there, start walking down the marsh. And as we're walking down the trail, the two guys I was with, they were kind of about 10, 15 feet behind. And I was talking with the two girls in the front. Just chatting, probably trying to say
ladies.
Probably trying to say nice things about the guys, trying to help them out here.
Wingman.
Like, oh yeah, that Jason, he's a really smart guy, and that Rob, well, I don't know if I have anything funny to say about Rob, but at the time I was just trying to help him out, and talking to the girls, making them laugh, doing it, whatever. And so we get down to this area of the marsh where I can see a sign that has some of those rules about no hunting and be careful and trespassing. And obviously we're there after the marsh is closed and you shouldn't be. And but anyway, I see this sign and I'm able to read the entire sign except for a person-shaped shadow in the middle of the sign.
Oh my.
And I'm like, that's weird. And I'm kind of blinking a little bit and looking and saying, like, what is that thing? And, because I can read the individual letters on the sign, if it was a person or something that was three-dimensional, I feel like I could see features. You'd see something. It was just looking into black. It's like staring at
But what if it was just a silhouette or something?
Well, sure. But a silhouette of what?
A person.
Right. I'm looking at it. It's just this shadow of a person against the sign. And I'm like, well, that's my eyes playing tricks on me.
How about that?
And I look over at the girls, and they're just like
Terrified.
yeah, just incredibly terrified, like the mouths over their hands. Like I see one girl starting to cry, and I'm just like, all right. And I look back at them, and they take off like running. And then I look back at this thing, and it's still there for a second, like, oh, okay, well, they're running away. And I look back at them, and then I look back, and there's nothing on the sign at all. Like, it's just, man. I can read the whole thing. There's nothing there. I'm like, that's really weird.
Okay, so that confirmed that it wasn't the sign. It wasn't.
Right. It wasn't. There was something there, but it was well lit enough that if something was in front of it or something was actually causing the shadow, casting the shadow,
Yeah.
then I would have
So
known.
it's like it was absorbing the light instead of being a shadow of something that was
is
in between the light.
That is a perfect way to put it, Miss Wendy. Something was absorbing the light instead of reflecting it.
That's scary.
And so I see that, and then I'm like, woo, I get that, I just get that feeling. And I don't know if that feeling was because, like, I don't know if it was evil or whatever, but you get that feeling
Sure.
of, okay, the fight or flight, something's here. I can't understand. Can it hurt me? What was it? I turn back, and finally the guys catch up with us, and the girls are like holding on to him, like, oh my God. Ah. And I don't mean to sound like the girls were hysterical and be like that they were typical hysterical girls in a horror movie. Mm-hmm. These two were typical hysterical girls in a horror movie.
Oh my gosh.
You can't, I just can't lie about it. Like, and whether they were doing it for attention or whatever they were doing because they were really scared, they saw it too. Like
Okay.
they absolutely saw it too, and that's what freaked them out. And they were real sensitive drama type girls, you know. And so they like I think finely tuned is a good way to put it. High strung and finely tuned.
Like an instrument.
And so they just freaked out, you know, and the guys are like, oh my God, what happened? You know, what'd you do, Hubert? Like, I didn't do nothing. Like, did you tell some kind of joke? No, I didn't do anything. It wasn't me. I'm like, there was something against the sign, and it was the shadow of a person, and it's not there anymore. And then they went over, we had flashlights, and we looked in and like, oh, it looks like the grass is matted in front of the sign. So was something there? Was something standing there that actually
was it
had
an animal? Maybe
had
it was
mass?
Bigfoot.
Well, if it was Bigfoot, I'd have a sweet
But you
Bigfoot
would've-
story.
Right. And you would have seen the hairy profile.
Yeah, and it wouldn't just been the size of a regular person; it would have been a monster.
Right.
But and I don't know. Like I can't tell if grass is actually matted.
I was going to say that's the kind of thing that's very easy to see what you want to see, kind of, you know.
Yeah, and you know, some dude like, what are you, some kind of tracker? What are
Expert.
you, nothing. Like this guy was the tracker.
I've been on the trail of the shadow person for
But
years.
it wasn't okay. People talk about shadow people like it's the corner of their eye. They see them, they're there for a second, and they're gone. They're like, oh, what was that?
You know, and this is what always makes me wonder, because on multiple occasions I've had that happen. You know, where you're driving and you see something, you think you see something, but then there's so many things it could be. And just like orbs, it could be a reflection of light or I guess whatever the opposite of that, a shadow, or I mean, just it could be your eye, like a
Right,
floater in your eye or something.
it could
like
be
that
right. It
just
could be
happens.
something.
So I always just chalk it off as, you know, my imagination exaggerating something like that I saw.
It could be a blot of mustard or a bit of undigested beef, Ebenezer Scrooge.
Yes, it could.
So-
it could.
So yeah, so you could see any right, and I've seen that too. Like stuff. It's like, what was that? Was that
So
something?
I think that, you know, when I hear this, sometimes when I hear the stories, now obviously some of them are much more vivid than others. If it's just like, if I actually saw a human figure, like, and I saw the hand reach out and like grab or do something really specific, then I'd probably wonder a lot more. But in the cases where I've seen strange things like that, I'm pretty sure it was just something that I perceived that perhaps my imagination, depending on my frame of mind, might
Right.
have enhanced a bit.
It was a chip in your eye.
It was a chip in my eye. Right. So that's what I always think about a lot
So-
with shadow people. But then there are stories that are much more detailed and much more where you're like, okay, that would require a lot of imagination.
Well, that's how I feel about my story. And like I tell people, like, I don't know what it is, but that is the best paranormal story that I have. Like I have a couple of small things, but as far as visuals, there's things that I felt that, you know, it could be active imagination. That's a visual that I shared with two other people that we saw dead on, and it was
Yeah.
scary.
And you experience the feeling too. So I mean, it's a lot different for you than hearing the description of it at face value. It's kind of like, oh, come on, man. You know,
Right.
you're in the dark. Like, it's easy to missee things. But the person hearing the story wasn't there and didn't feel the goosebumps, you know,
Right, and that sense
Terror.
of dread and terror, and like, okay, you know, and that's something that I don't. It's like, oh, people say they get a sense of dread. Well, you're going to get that when you see something unexplained. Like that
Right.
seems like basic psychology, but you know, I feel that too. Sharing that with other people that they saw it, like, okay, so there was something that we all saw, and that's probably like that's when I realize that other people see shadow people. You know.
yeah.
That's when I'm like, oh my God, okay, so other people have seen this too, and not just something in the corner of your eye. You see a form standing there that shouldn't be.
That's right.
And, you know, that's how I feel like that's that sense of uncanny. When they talk about the uncanny valley and you're looking at, an uncanny valley is that sense of weirdness you feel when you look at a computer animation of a person, but it's really close to a person, but it's not close enough that it actually looks like someone. And so it's a feeling of discomfort that you get when you see that somewhere between a simulation and it's close enough to be real, but it's not close enough.
But your brain knows because it's very sensitive to details and
Right. It's not close enough to convince you. Anyway, that was my first like real paranormal experience where I had an actual visual. Now,
Well, that's pretty cool. And you never did get an answer as to what it was. So that's a lingering mystery for your lifetime that you'll never.
Right. That's one of those
never
things.
know.
And you know that we had returned to the marsh several times after that. And only one time after that was there any kind of experience. But I didn't see it. I saw it with a couple. I was with a couple other guys. And then they like freaked out. They brought like, not cap guns, but like BB guns. And they started firing the BB guns off into the woods. Yeah. Like we were down there. We were just a little further in where it was a lot darker. And this wasn't a full moon or anything. This was like no moon. And we were down there like a little further into the forest. We're super dark. And these guys start freaking out. They start firing off the BB guns. They start yelling. And I was just, and we were with two girls again, different ones this time.
You're totally like, just hearing your description, I'm completely envisioning a B horror movie. Like it's exactly what every premise of those movies.
That's how it was, because these guys are screaming, and I'm like, okay. And I look, I'm like, what's going on? They're like, run. I'm like, okay. So I grabbed the chicks I was with, and we ran off. We ran down the path, and the only reason that I put any credence into what these guys were saying they saw, they say they saw a group of shadows moving around, and as we were running away, they saw the shadows behind us, like following.
Okay, right. That would not make me feel great.
And the thing is, we crossed this train tracks at the edge of the marsh, and then as soon as we cross the train tracks, I see the train. There's a train coming, and these two guys.
Stand by me.
Yeah, it was like that, and they're running out of the woods. And these guys run out of the woods. They're running, and they're not going to make it past the train. And they're like screaming, and I'm like, oh my God. And I'm like,
see, that's totally a horror movie.
Right. And I'm like, this is like, holy crap. And so they start running towards me. The train's coming. I'm like, they're just going to get killed by the train. Like if they don't get killed by the shadows, they're going to get killed by the train. And then the train passes, and they didn't jump or anything. So everybody's lived.
Oh, good.
But I was expecting, the way they were screaming and going on, I was expecting to see them be like ripped apart. Like
man.
Every time, when the train finally passed. But that's when they said like we were yelling because they were following you. And I'm like,
and if they really wanted to get you guys good, they could have just hidden.
Yeah, and done it themselves.
Like they could have hidden after the train went by and made you think that they were gone.
Yes, that'd have been a good one.
That would have been so cruel.
It's like, oh God, they're dead. So anyway, like I said, we went back a bunch of times, but only the first time was I had something that I would say was an authentic experience with other people that I can't explain. And that's like my favorite paranormal
cool.
experience. So that's why I like talking about shadow people, because I have something to bring to the table.
Yeah, you can relate to it.
And when we talked to Patrick Doyle from Ghost Mine, that was his first experience as well.
Yeah, that's what got him into the whole field of research there.
Because he said he saw just a shadow person in his living room.
With a tall hat.
Well, now, that's the thing.
And that's so weird.
That's one of the things they talk about on Coast to Coast. That it's not just the shadow person. It's the Hat Man. Yeah, that's what they call him.
I'm just picturing this like Abraham Lincoln sort of apparition running around. Like every time I hear that, that's what I picture in my head.
Uh-oh, it's the shadow with the hat. It's Honest Abe.
But that is really weird, though. Why would they always have a hat? I mean, what's the deal with that?
Well, okay, so there's an author by the name of Heidi Hollis, and she's got a book, The Secret War, a true story about a real alien war and shadow people. She really coined the phrase shadow people. She was interviewed on Coast to Coast a bunch of times, and she connects it to aliens. That there's an ancient war brewing in our skies and in the homes of individuals around the world. With horror surrounding Hollis and a college roommate on a daily basis, they both are given the tools to defend themselves against this dark menace. This help came to them by the way of a being who is already engaged in this secret war, an alien who claimed to be watching the battle between good and evil.
Ooh.
And so she's written some books on it. She's been on Coast to Coast. She's got a book called The Hat Man. And it's all about the infamous shadow hat man that comes, and they just it's the same idea that there's a secret war going on between good and evil. Aliens are involved somehow because, of course.
Yeah, right.
And
naturally.
And the hat man's, if they're going to call you the hat man and you're a shadow person, chances are you're not on the side of good.
Mike, if the hat man can do it, brother, so can you.
Thank you. So that's, I mean, obviously that's combining some parts fiction in there, even though I think Amazon sells it on the nonfiction. It's on Kindle Unlimited. We'll put a link to it. So it's free if you
Cool.
got Kindle Unlimited, that you can read a little bit about that secret war. Because it's a true story about a real alien war.
Whoa.
Yeah. And so there's more. I mean, people have done more research into shadow people, and I have too, but come on, I got no explanations for anything. It's just shadows. But you know what? This kind of reminds me of a story we heard on Coast to Coast one time when they were telling ghost stories on Ghost to Ghost. And I think we were driving through Chicago on the way back from somewhere, and they talked about the shadow with the red eyes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I remember that. I feel like we were in Ohio for some reason.
Okay, well, it could have been Ohio.
Somewhere in the
but
Midwest, I don't know.
Either we were driving through on a way back from a show, but either way, like you and Ben, this is okay. So when we used to tour, in our original vehicle, it was Ben's truck, our guitar player, and it was a truck without a back seat. So
Yeah, just a small cab, a little, was it Nissan or something like that?
yeah. So, Nissan or a Zuzu or something. Like,
Yeah.
it was just it was the tiniest truck you could find, and you would fit 3 people across the bench seat, and that's just how we travel. And
But it had a cover over the back, so we could put the gear in the pickup truck, and it was protected.
Right. But like I didn't drive stick, so I never drove that particular truck, and I had to like I had a leg in each area. Like sometimes we put the 2 legs in one, but otherwise I'd have a leg next to the driver and a leg next to the passenger.
Because you had the bump from the
the middle
wheel
seat.
thing underneath.
Yeah. And so anyway, so that's just how we sat.
train.
And sometimes you'd fall asleep, and you kind of just fall asleep on that person's shoulder or whatever. And when you guys were listening to that, you're like, "Wake up, Mike! We're scared." And it was like, "What?" And they were telling a story about a red-eyed shadow. And there's an interesting article I'm reading on Mysterious Universe about someone who's studied the different kinds of shadow people.
Oh, okay.
So this guy starts out. This is written by Jason Offutt, and the article is called "The Lurking Shadow People," and it's on Mysterious Universe, which is another excellent paranormal podcast that doesn't write songs. And so that one we have benign shadows, and that's just shadows that seem to travel briefly through a person's life, he says. I saw these entities as a child, the author did. They appeared to walk with purpose through my room, never acknowledging me and never straying from their path. He never felt fear at them.
So like a recording
Yeah,
type of.
that's exactly just there's the shadow walking through his room like, "Hey, Jason, what's going on, brother?"
No big deal.
Yep. The negative shadows. Shadow people that people associate with a feeling of unnatural terror.
Okay, kind of like what you experienced.
That's what Daddy saw right here. Yeah, that's unnatural terror. That's about right. Red-eyed shadows. These entities are always negative, but stare at experiencers with blazing red eyes. Victims say they often feel this creature feeds from their fear.
Ooh,
Yeah.
that's the worst too, because that's only going to make you more scared, and then they're going to feed more off of it. It's
Right.
like-
Right. It's a downward spiral until eventually you just scare yourself to death and you have a heart attack. Hooded shadows. Dressed as an ancient monk, people who encounter these shadow people feel a deep rage bubbling behind the black cowl.
Whoa, like a Grim Reaper kind of.
Yeah. And then the Hat Man. This entity is the most curious. That's totally what I was thinking of too. And it doesn't seem as scary if the Scat Man's like the Hat Man.
Right, he's like dancing around, like putting on the Ritz.
Yeah. This entity is the most curious. Dressed in a fedora and sometimes appearing to wear an old-time business suit, the Hat Man appears to people in cultures across the planet.
And the Hat Man is what Patrick Doyle was describing in episode 62, where he said that he saw it as a child and he wasn't afraid of it. And then it had like a presence that kind of changed when it realized that he wasn't scared.
Yeah, like it was mad at him.
That story was really interesting.
Yeah, because there's a lot of emotion involved. Like there's a lot of thinking.
Yeah.
And I feel like in my story I saw like there was nothing like he wasn't, I don't know if he was trying to feed on my fear. I don't know if it was a he or a she. I mean, obviously a shadow probably doesn't have genitalia, but the whole thing.
Well, whatever it is.
But I mean, people will say like, it's a demonic entity, or it's a ghost, or it's an interdimensional traveler, like all these kind of things. But the thing is, like, nobody has any answers about the shadow people.
Okay.
But the people see them.
There's lots of documentation of experience.
I saw a shadow person for reals. And so, like, I believe in it. I believe that I believe that things happen and people see shadows. I don't necessarily believe that they're demonic entities. But so let's go back and talk about some of the pop culture impact of shadow people. Obviously, shadows are scary, and they're used to, animated shadows are used in different horror movies and stuff to kind of scare people. There's a cool Twilight Zone, the 80s Twilight Zone, which is one of my favorite. I love the old Twilight Zones, but the 80s Twilight Zones were really excellent too, because they would get great directors like Wes Craven and Tobe Hooper. They get writers like George R. R. Martin, who's, Game of Thrones. Oh, Joe Dante, the director of Gremlins. So you just had really great writers and directors willing to do the Twilight Zone. And it was super fun to watch, and I loved it as a kid. And there's an episode called The Shadow Man.
Okay.
And if you guys haven't seen it, I'm gonna spoil The Shadow Man for you.
Okay, so they could skip ahead like a minute if they don't want it spoiled.
It's a little kid who's got a shadow underneath his bed. And the shadow man comes out from under his bed, and he promises that he won't harm the person under whose bed he lives. And then he leaves the house. So, like all of a sudden these kids start disappearing. There's attacks on children, and the witnesses describe the attacker as a shadowy man. And then, like, the kid's trying to take pictures. He keeps on seeing the shadow man leave his house. And so the kid eventually, this other kid keeps picking on him. And one day he sees the shadow man coming for the kid that keeps picking on him. Well, the kid who's got the shadow under the bed goes to the other kid who's getting picked on, and he kind of tries to protect him a little bit. And the kid then runs off, and the shadow man starts choking the kid whose bed it's under. And he's like, why? You promised me you wouldn't hurt me, that you wouldn't hurt the person under whose bed that you live. And then the shadow man states, but I'm the shadow man from someone else's bed.
Nice.
So it's got the Twilight Zone twist at the end, and it's got the idea that it's just a shadow of something that hurts people.
Oh, man.
And that's back in the 80s.
Cool. That's pretty sweet.
More recently, there was a film called Shadow People that talks about mysterious nocturnal entities that are responsible for a spate of deaths in a small town. And then a couple of investigators go to check it out. It's got Clint Eastwood's daughter, Allison, in it.
Okay.
So it's got a little Hollywood pedigree. It's not like the usual. We talk about a lot of these movies like El Chupacabra and stuff like that are made for like $17 by the Sci-Fi Channel.
Yeah.
And they bring back like Ponch from Chips or something, like Eric Estrada or anything like, no, this. I don't want to talk too much about it because I heard it's a really good film.
Okay.
So, but it does deal with the idea of shadowy entities, and they have like fake it's one of those like fake found footage films too. That's got
cool.
Puts
Those
in
are
there
scary.
too, like Paranormal Activity and the Blair Witch Project. So, no, they made a movie about it in 2012. So, like Hollywood's picked up on the shadow person. They've integrated it into their own.
A widespread enough phenomenon that people can relate to it and enjoy that type of entertainment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And also, there's stories about it on Creepypasta. So. Now, creepypasta is like huge with kids because kids love horror stories.
Mm-hmm.
Kids love being scared. And so kind of what creepypasta is it came from, a website called 4chan where they used to call viral memes where people would just copy like a quote or a short story or something, and they'd paste it into a forum. They would paste pretty much a forum before social media, because this is really before people would just post it on Facebook or whatever. But think about people posting their favorite quotes on Facebook or short stories, and this is a very similar thing. Think about your conservative uncle or whatever who's going to paste something on your wall about the flag or something. This is the same kind of thing. And on 4chan, they used to, because you copied the text and pasted it, they used to call it copy pasta. as like that's just
Right.
the way they refer to it. It's fun. It's cool. That's just a copy pasta thing.
Yeah.
And when people started doing it with short horror stories, they called it creepypasta.
That is
And so
interesting.
we probably should save the explanation of creepypasta for an episode about the Slender Man, because the
Right.
stories of the Slender Man that's creepypasta is where people started, and that's where those girls in Waukesha, Wisconsin, not too far away from the Vernon Marsh, actually not I mean just a couple miles from the
Yeah,
Vernon
that's
Marsh
really
actually,
close.
decided to kill their sacrifice their friend to the Slender Man.
Unbelievable.
A character without any even real basis in real belief whatsoever.
Right, a completely fictional character.
And so this on creepypasta, the shadow people are very popular. Shadow-like creatures of supernatural origin who appear as dark forms in the peripheries of people's vision and disintegrate or move between walls when noticed. And there's just a whole bunch of short creepypasta stories about shadow people. So it came from this small discussion on Coast to Coast AM or people having stories, and now it really has gelled in the 21st century into a new the shadow people aren't ghosts. They're not aliens. I mean, they might be ghosts. They might be aliens. That's what I mean is they're not
kind of in a league of their own as far
Right.
as paranormal.
bingo. They've become their own category of paranormal phenomena.
That's pretty cool.
So I think a shadow people is one of the first really modern, it's a modern legend. Mm-hmm. That's kind of created, spread on the internet, spread through radio programs, spread through books and people's personal experiences. Because when you look at creepypasta stuff, I could put my story in there as an actual experience.
I see.
I mean, it wouldn't have a stinger or a twist like the Twilight Zone thing, but I could put my thing, and if I made the story scary enough,
yeah.
that would be the kind of thing that people could spread around. And that's the whole idea, that you see this, you're impressionable, or anything. It's just
Right.
that's how these memes spread.
And
so
whether it's fictional or not, when you're reading a tale that's recounted by someone,
right.
it feels, a lot of times it feels real when it's just somebody typing on the internet oh man, I can't believe this guy's, as opposed to a formally published
right.
story or something.
And especially when it's someone's personal, they have that personal memory of something. I think that really affects it in a lot of ways. Where something's extra scary because it happened to someone. It happened to someone real.
Yeah, it's personal.
Right, and someone's like, this is what happened to me, and that kind of what makes it scary. As far as scientific explanations, there's always sleep paralysis. Sleep paralysis. I saw weird things when I woke up. Adam Gray, from the episode we did where we interviewed the Gray brothers on documenting the paranormal, he was so affected by seeing some disgusting creature at the end of his bed. He couldn't sleep. It was post-traumatic stress disorder, and he made a movie about it.
That's right.
He was so affected by it that he was compelled to make a documentary film about the crazy things people see. Well, we were inspired enough to write a song called Hypnagogia about
That's right.
that between sleeping and waking, those weird things you see. And a person experiencing that might certainly see shadow people surrounding it.
Yeah, definitely.
So there's that kind of sleep paralysis thing.
And the half dream state too, where your mind might take something that it perceives through your eyes or your ears or whatever and fabricate the rest of it.
Right. Oh, yeah. All you need is that little stimuli for your brain to take hold. There's also explanation. This one is from a psychiatry magazine, Rapid Psychiatry. And they are saying that it could be just heightened emotions. When you're walking alone on a dark night and you're afraid, you incorrectly perceive a patch of shadow as an attacker or something. You see that and you're like, oh, and could that be what I saw? Maybe, but would everybody else see that? Were their emotions as heightened? And I wasn't even that scared at the time. I was like, ooh, it's kind of, but it was a full moon, plenty of light. Many methamphetamine addicts report the appearance of shadow people after prolonged periods of sleep deprivation. So when you're done, when you're, coming back from meth and you haven't slept for a long time, well, your eyes start playing tricks. And we haven't, when performing and everything like that, I would say there's a lot of times where we haven't slept for a long period of time. time.
Oh, yeah.
Right. It's like, hey, we've been up for 72 hours, everybody, all right. And then you know how wacky you get when you don't go to sleep.
Get sensitive to things.
Yeah, in fact, they say sleep deprivation, when you're driving, when you're sleep deprived, it's worse than when you're driving intoxicated.
Wow.
So if you're driving right now and you're really tired, don't close your eyes. Just
Stop and get some sleep.
Right. Stop somewhere and get some rest. You're going to feel better.
It's okay.
And the chances of you doing something so important that you shouldn't sleep are low.
That's true.
So, right.
Safety first, friends.
Most of the time, I think when I was really tired, I was trying to get to some job that I hated. So don't bother. Quit your job. So yeah, so methamphetamine addicts, and I have to say, when I had my experience, we were playing role-playing games. There were absolutely no drugs or drinking involved. Like, I guess that goes without saying, but like
maybe some Mountain Dew.
Maybe a little bit of Mountain Dew. So I guess there was some caffeine. Caffeine's a drug, yeah. So there probably was some Dew or Diet Coke or something like that.
Dude.
But beyond sugar, salt, and caffeine, there were no substances involved that people would normally associate with seeing crazy things.
Yeah.
I guess that goes. I was just gonna say, if you're playing Dungeons and Dragons, then maybe it's like some dude's high. But if you're playing Top Secret SI, the game that we were playing, then you would know that person wouldn't even know where to find drugs if his brother was a dealer. That's just that kind of game is like a dork supreme game.
Yeah.
And I loved it. So, and there's an online game called Deep Sleep, where shadow people have existed since the dawn of the human race and lurk in lucid dreams.
That sounds fun.
There's a game called Shadow of the Colossus, where shadow people are enemies, and you got to fight them. And so there's just there's a whole bunch of different media that feature shadow people now that may have it in the past. So, like, it really is an example of this 21st century legend, and I'm excited that I had an experience about it.
That is really cool. Yeah, I'm glad that you did, because I believe something that you tell me. I mean,
thanks.
I consider you a
most of the time
source of all the people I know, and certainly above anything I hear on the radio or anything I read on the internet. It's like, a friend or a family member or somebody you trust, you hear the story from them, it's gonna have more credibility. So
absolutely, you're gonna be. Well, I think for me too is I'm not trying to sell anybody a book about shadow people, and I've had weird experiences that I can just completely discount.
Yeah, right.
So, but the thing is, if you guys have had an experience about shadow people, we'd love to hear about it. So tweet us
for sure
at Other Side Talk. You can tweet us and you can tell us about your experiences about shadow people and let us know if you have seen one. Now, and it's cool if you've seen it in the corner of your eye. I respect that. But the kind of experience that I think we want to hear about are if you saw some dude walking across the room and wanted to eat your fear.
Right. Or with the glowing red eyes. Or
right.
I mean, really just saw something that you were certain wasn't just a fleck in your eye.
If you believe it, we're ready to believe you.
That's right. Yes,
so,
indeed. Very
so,
cool.
I mean, the theories about shadow people that it might be, aliens, or it might be interdimensional travelers or things like that. I like to think about shadow people that when you see the shadow of something like that, something it could be is the remnants of somebody who used to be there. Like you said, a recording. Mm-hmm. It's not quite that same kind of person.
It's just that it seems like they always have an evil connotation.
It does.
So whereas like a lot of the ghost replay recording type sightings are just a repeat of an event that might have been some kind of impactful event in a person's life. But I feel like with the shadow people, at least most of the things that I've heard or read, it's always like associated with a negative, bad, or evil kind of feeling. So if it is a remnant of a life or, a soul or whatever, something that happened, it's like, why is it evil? Why is it negative?
Well, that's kind of the song topic for the week.
Ooh.
So the idea of the song this week is about when all that's left of a person is the dark parts, then you just get the shadow of who they used to be.
Aha.
So let's take a listen to our new Sunspot song, Shadow.
watching my growth. The moment your conscience broke. How about the downward spiral and the years of denial? Do you remember every time you promised not another? 'Cause when you hit, you'll hit until it hurts. You bleed until you're empty. You struggle and you curse against your fragility. All the king's horses, all the king's men cannot break your fall. You're just a shadow on the wall. Can your soul be born again? Until your demons let you go, you're just a shadow of who I used to know. All the king's horses, all the king's men cannot break your fall. You're just a shadow on the wall. Can your soul be born again? Until your demons let you go, you're just a shadow of who I used to know.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. You can find us online at OthersidePodcast.com. Until next time, see you on the other side.
I remember when.
I can't believe the Wright brothers made a flying machine.